Today we'll be reading Matthew 13:1 through 23, the parable of the sower. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on a path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell quickly on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and had brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. If you have ears, hear." The purpose of the parable is the next section. Then the disciples came and asked him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will be given in abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. The reason I speak to them in parables is that seeing they do not perceive, and hearing they do not listen, nor do they understand. With them indeed is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah that says, 'You will indeed listen, but never understand, and you will indeed look, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and their ears are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they might not look with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Truly, I tell you, many prophets and righteous people have longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and hear what you hear, but did not hear it." The parable of the sower explained. This next section. "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. That is what is sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures it for only a while. And then when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the person who hears the word, but cares of this age and the lure of wealth and choke of the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields it, in one case 100-fold, and in another 60, and another 30. May God bless these words to our understanding."
The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" Matthew is very generous to the disciples and has Jesus assume the disciples know what's going on. When I read that verse, have the suspicion of, sometimes you ask, well, why don't you explain it clearer to them? Because you don't want to say, okay, I don't have a clue. I don't understand. Parables aren't easy stories to understand. That's their whole intent. Parables are stories which are designed to make us think, to make us, to surprise us, to catch us and challenge how we understand the world. Generally speaking, a parable is not an allegory. An allegory is one of those things, actually, the end of this passage where Jesus explains the parable of the sower tends to treat it like an allegory. This means that, this means that. Parables can be treated as allegories. We treat them as allegories all the time. When we talk about the Good Samaritan, when we talk about our favorite parables, it's easy if we can say, well, this character is this character. This one's God, this one's us, this one. Parables don't always lend themselves to that. Because the nature of a parable is to catch you by surprise, to make you think. I think the nature of a parable is to help us go deeper, to grow our roots deeper. I'll come back to that when we talk about rocks and rocky soil. So a sower goes out to sow. Now, one commentary I read suggests that maybe one of the reasons the disciples, who are, especially those first four, are fishermen. What do they know about farming? They know about fishing. So maybe that's part of why they don't understand it. But a sower goes out to sow. And this farmer seems to be profligate. Seed is a valuable commodity in any age, any time since the humans first started saving seed and growing it for the next year. Seed is a valuable commodity. You want to get every bit of grain you can out of the seed you sow. And so you would prepare your field carefully. You would want to make sure the seed lands where it's going to do the most good. This farmer, however, seems to be walking along, letting the seed fall where it will. Seems wasteful, the way Jesus tells the story. Now, it's quite possible that subsistence farming in the first century, maybe your field, you could only do so much to prepare your field, and no matter what you did, there would be the rocky patch and the weeds that you just can't get rid of. And that place where people insist on taking a shortcut and walking through. But for whatever reason, the seed lands in these four distinct zones: the hard path, the good soil, the rocky ground, and that weed patch over there. And what happens is what you would expect to happen. The seed which lands on the hard ground doesn't grow really well. Doesn't grow at all. The seed which lands among the rocks starts to grow, but can't get well rooted. Doesn't have enough to sustain itself when the sun comes out and withers away. As I say, I think that's part of the nature of parables, is to help us dig deeper and get that rootedness. And then, of course, the stuff that grows in the thorns just gets choked off. There's too much. And then there's the seed that lands in good soil. Nicely plowed, rich, fertile. Wouldn't we all like our gardens to be the good soil? And a lot of times when I've preached on this, I've talked about seeds. And I've talked about earth. But the character who always intrigues me is that farmer, scattering seed willy-nilly. And I think that when we consider the dirt and we consider the seeds and we consider the growing conditions, we can gain much. There's never one right way to interpret a parable. There's never one right way to gain meaning from a parable, or pretty much any passage of Scripture for that matter. but that farmer, scattering the seed willy-nilly. Often in the church, often in the modern world, we are really careful about where we put our resources. We want almost a full guarantee that what we try next is going to work. And until we get that guarantee, there's going to be the voices who say, we can't do it. It's wasteful. We don't have the money. We don't have the manpower. We just can't do it. We want every seed, every little thing we try, every new initiative we try to be placed carefully into good soil. I remember a woman I once knew who was very careful with her garden, with her vegetable garden. And even small seeds like carrot seeds, she would place one by one in the row. Not sure why she didn't just buy seed tape. Sometimes in the church, when we have the chance to take on new initiatives, sometimes in the church when we are faced with the fact that we should try something different, we want to place very carefully in good soil, because if we're going to put all these resources in, it better work. We better not waste those resources. Maybe we're getting that wrong. Maybe we should be a bit more like the farmer, tossing handfuls of seed up in the air and letting it land where it will. People who work with innovators, with inventors, will say that for every big hit, everything that works really well, there are, well, some will say 9 out of 10, and some will say 99 out of 100 ideas which didn't quite make the grade. Scatter the seed willy-nilly, and some of it grows and some of it doesn't. The other thing that strikes me about that seed being scattered and our need for being sure how it will work is that we don't know how it will work. A concrete sidewalk looks like the last place you would ever find a chance for something to grow. How many of us have walked down the sidewalk and found the plant which has found just the tiniest crack? Okay, often it's a weed. Weeds can teach us something about stubbornness. But just the tiniest crack, and life comes. Sometimes in the places we don't think there's hope, we think, oh, nothing can happen there. The seed lands, and it's not eaten by birds, and it fights through the rocks to develop roots, and it fights off the other plants. But if we didn't scatter the seed there, if we didn't take the chance, what would grow? I think we need to be a bit more willing to maybe waste resources. Even though there are always the voices that say we don't have enough to do what we're doing now. Well, the other side is maybe we need to do something, drop something we're doing now so we can do something different. But we need to be more willing to not be so sure that, oh, this has to work, please let it work. We need to be willing to be, for this new project, to be one of the 9 of 10, or the 99 out of 100 that innovators say you need. There's a saying that if you never fail, it doesn't mean you're just really good at what you do. It means you're not being carefree enough. You're not trying enough. I think we need to be more willing to scatter and try new things. it worked quite well that Patty shared the work that the Futures Task Group is doing this morning. Because over and over again in congregations, I hear the stories of the places that they keep doing what they think they're good at, what's worked in the past, because that they think is the good soil. Because they don't have the resources to waste. To take the chance that, oh, that over there looks kind of weedy. I'm not going to bother putting any seeds in there. And yeah, that's just hard. Nothing can grow there. I think as we move forward, we need to be willing to take those chances, whatever it ends up being. There are lots of possibilities. There's lots of places the seeds can land. There's lots of seeds we could throw around. But we think we need to be willing to take the chances and not have to have that guarantee that this will grow really well here. Partly because I don't think we always know what will grow and where it will grow. Or maybe that's just because I'm a really bad gardener. And partly because in the end, we're not responsible for the growth. We're not the ones that causes the growth to happen. Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, said, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. And yes, in that passage, Paul is trying to convince the people of Corinth to stop dividing themselves into factions because I'm better than you are because of who I follow. But the same principle applies. We are not responsible for the growth. We're responsible for helping the growth. But the growth is sparked beyond us. The growth comes from God. Who are we to limit? If somebody in our midst says, I've got an idea, I think this is where God is calling us to be, who are we to necessarily say that's just going to be a waste of resources? We do it carefully. We'll never get to the point where we just say, oh, go ahead. Go for it freely. I don't see the church ever being like that. But we need the willingness to try, to experiment, because God gives the growth. Think of the dandelion growing through the crack in the sidewalk. Or if it's lucky, it may be something different that grows because of the right seed. If the right bird drops the right seed in the right place, you get something magnificent growing where you never expected it. And sometimes where you never wanted it, and sometimes it's a pain. But God gives the growth. God calls us to be willing to spread the good news, to spread the gospel, to spread hope, and let it fall where it will, and God will give the growth. A sower went out to sow. And he casts the seed all over the field. Can we do the same? Can we not be so worried about success and more worried about spreading the good news, spreading hope, spreading promise and possibility, even if at times it looks a little bit wasteful? Amen. Our hymn from Voices United, number 520. We plow the fields and scatter the good seed on the land.